No justice, no peace. I'm Janelle,
I'm Alana.
I'm Kalia.
And I'm Donnie.
and welcome to
MLK's
DMLK
The
The Take.
Take.
In this series, we will release a new episode every other Thursday where we discuss the Black youth perspective on the minority experience in America. This is our take on why your independence is not ours. In today's episode, we will be featuring Frederick Douglass's What to the Slave is the 4th of July. Since this is our first episode, we have a trigger alert for y'all so you can understand the expectations you need to follow before you witness our discussion. Alana, before we get started, can you please read the trigger alert?
All right, so are y'all ready?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. If you are not 110% in support of Black Lives Matter, please dismiss yourself. If you are in any sort of agreement with the systemic oppressions this country has inflicted on minorities, please dismiss yourself. And if you are not willing to give every bit the power that the people so undeniably deserve, then please dismiss yourself. Because in a few moments, you will witness vast amounts of Black engagement. And if you do not dismiss yourself, then the thoughts, facts, and feelings we are about to share will most definitely dismiss you. So, I'm asking again, are y'all ready?
Yes. As we have this discussion, you are not off the hook for doing some work too. We want your take. What are the questions, your comments as you listen? So the chat box will be open for you to leave your questions and comments. Towards the end of the show, we'll have a dedicated time solely towards addressing them. Every episode will end with a call to action.
All right, y'all, so let's get into it. Frederick Douglass said, and hath commanded all men everywhere to love one another, yet you notoriously hate all men whose skins are not colored like your own. I feel like this quote in itself holds so much significance to the whole culture surrounding the 4th of July and the historic systemic oppression that we still experience today. So let me ask you, Kalia, how does this quote resonate with you?
I feel like this quote resonates with me because, like a lot of other Americans, I've celebrated the 4th of July almost my entire life. But, like, I've always had this thought in the back of my head, what is this actually about? What am I celebrating this for? What am I popping firecrackers for? And I feel like the 4th of July in general has become so ingrained in American culture that it's become a normality and expectation to celebrate it.
All right, so let's talk about this idea of a normality. What is a normality?
I got the definition for y'all. Normality, the state of being usual, typical, or expected.
All right, so how does that play into our celebration and glorification of the 4th of July? Like, when you look back into the days of in which the white man was liberated, slaves were still enslaved. And they looked forward to this promise of freedom that the white man was able to give them, and they were hopeful that this promise would be kept, hence liberty and justice for all. But that promise obviously was not kept. And let's look at why they were even able to give the slaves this false promise of freedom. A lot of people do not know that that white people were oppressed, and they were oppressed in Europe. And in Europe, it wasn't necessarily, they weren't discriminated against because of the color of their skin. They were classified and separated based off who had the most money or who had power, and that's what pretty much classified them. And that's the mindset that they basically brought to this country. So how do you think that experience influenced the way this country's operated even up to today?
I feel like that experience influenced how this country is operated because, like, as you said, back in Europe, it was mainly white people. And the only way they could really differentiate each other was, like, how you said, class, power, or how much money you had. So when they came here to America and they saw all the brown Native Americans, they knew that they had to build a new hierarchy where they would somehow still be on top. And if they were all different skin colors, they thought, how about let's turn this idea of a class hierarchy where money, power, and class are what make you better or, like, I guess, like, placed higher or lower in society, and let's make that about race and make sure that us, the white people, are on top. So with that being said, yeah. And with that being said, I'll ask you, Donnie, how do you think this mindset was used to gain power in this quote unquote new society?
So y'all know that the Native Americans thought of their place as sacred. It was their home that no one knew about till Columbus. The white man made his discovery. They even welcomed Columbus with open arms, and he took advantage of the situation. He left and later came back with his people. He later came back with his people to take over their land. They used all these tactics, like purposely getting the natives sick with deadly diseases and committing multiple acts of genocide. For example, the Trail of Tears and the Kingalu genocide. That killed at least 90% of the Native Americans. Columbus and his people felt so empowered that knowing they could control and take over the land, that everyone else fell behind. And
Wait, hold on one second. Owana, do you remember that song where it's like the cereal commercial and it's like Christopher? Yes, the mini wheats commercial. It's like Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492.
Ain't it sad that we know that?
I know, but literally. Anyways, go on, Donnie.
I was saying, like, they had this mindset that they used to bring the slaves here from Africa. Yeah. So that leads into the question, what control and tactics did they use when it came to the slaves?
Well, when the slaves were brought here, they were stripped of their culture, they were stripped of their heritage, their religion, and their identities. Like, a lot of people may not know that when the slaves were brought here, their names were taken from them. So their birth given names were taken, and they had to take the names of their slave owners and go by that. And all of this was done so that they could force this ideology of American culture onto these people, you know? And they took note of the fact that the Africans, they looked up to their African deities. They looked up to their gods and goddesses, and that's who they wanted to serve, and that is who they wanted to, you know, like, to please. And because of this, the colonizers decided to take this idea of God and manipulate it, because everybody should know that back then the Bible was that book. Like, anything that was in the Bible was what goes. So, you know, with everyone looking up to the Bible and these Africans looking up to their God, the colonizers found a way to use that to their advantage. So everyone knows the story of Adam and Eve, right? And because Eve ate the apple or the forbidden fruit, there was a consequence, and any woman that's trying to have a child would do so at the expense of a lot of pain. Well, the slaves were told a story, and it's called the story of Ham. And basically, the story is, well, what how it was told to them is that God sent Noah and his wife and a male and a female of every species into the ark when he basically when he was restarting the earth, for short, and sent each of them in there and said, "There shall be no procreation within the ark." So the slaves were told that because there was creation in the ark, the consequence is anyone with black skin is cursed. Now, that is not justifiable, especially not in the eyes of God, because we are all supposed to be equal and He loves us equally. But now you see how they were able to take this idea of God, use it to manipulate it and use it to their advantage, because now that the slaves are thinking of themselves as basically a procreation of a sin, they're doing anything that they can to make up for that and to please their God, which is why they listened to everything that the colonizers told them, and they did not rebel against them because they wanted their freedom. And the colonizers told them, if you serve this God and do as I say, then you'll be able to attain that. But we start to see the pattern in how that was not attained. So, I mean, it's like God was not the motivation for enslaving, you know, Africans. It was the justification. And there is no way that the word of God would be able to justify the things that they were doing. So when you guys hear all of that, then it leads me to the question of, how is this significant to the difference between Juneteenth and the 4th of July?
I think this is significant to the difference because, as we know, Juneteenth is the celebration of the liberation of the slaves, and the 4th of July is the celebration of the liberation of the white man from Europe to come to America. So, and as I said, well, as I'm going to say, our society is built off this idea, one nation under God, but for some reason, our celebrations of liberation are unequally celebrated. In fact, Juneteenth is completely under celebrated. So, with that being said, I'll ask you, Lana, if we are one nation under God and he sees us all as equal, why is my liberation not as important as yours?
So our liberation wasn't as important to them, or wasn't as important, is because whether we are free or not, we're still going to be treated as second-class citizens. We're still going to be treated like the bottom. We're still going to be treated like we're nothing. So of course our freedom wasn't important to them, you know? So they always thought of us as commodities, and we're able to decrease and increase our worth. Janelle, you want to tell me what a commodity is?
A commodity is an economic good or service that has full or substantial fungibility.
So when they determined us as commodities, they put a price. They put a price over our head and determined our worth, which wasn't much already in the eyes of us, or in our own eyes. So that mentality that we had of not being enough and never being enough was carried on through generational trauma throughout all of our lives, which is why you see it now in our parents and children and grandparents. They all still have that slave mentality because of generational trauma. You want to tell me what generational trauma is?
And generational trauma is a psychological term which asserts that trauma can be transferred in between generations. And through generational trauma and that slave mentality, as Alana already mentioned, you see how the physical chains that technically enslaved us, although they were basically broken, now that we have carried this slave mentality for so long, those physical chains became internalized. So it's like we are still enslaved by mind, by tactics, by word, by manipulation, and a lot of people fail to realize that, which is why we say, even though technically we did get our liberation, in this country, we are not free. We are not liberated.
So playing off of that, um, knowing that in the eyes of the people who had enslaved us, we were never going to be enough and that we were worthless. It's off of what Janelle said earlier, the procreation of sin. It created this sense of self-hatred, you know. I'm going to hate myself because all these people hate me and they tell me that I'm the procreation of sin and that everything I do is bad. So why wouldn't they feel bad about themselves?
Right. And this was carried on through that generational trauma that we just talked about. And I feel like each of us have had an experience where we kind of like exerted that slave mentality of the fact that we are less, or the wrongdoings that are being done to us are okay. Like, I remember when I was in the 5th grade, I went to this school in Lakewood, and in this school, there was an incident where one of my classmates, he was a white boy, he had called me a nigger, and it was like I was really, really, really hurt by that and upset by it. But at the same time, I was so young, and that had never actually happened to me before. So I didn't really know how to handle it. Of course, I took it to the staff at the school, and I told them basically what happened, and it's the way that they handled this situation was terrible, because they brought us back to the class and decided to have a class discussion of why this was not okay. And I'm sitting there with all of these feelings bottled up. I was like embarrassed, like ashamed, I was mad, I was sad, I was hurt. And all I can remember is having to continue to bottle up and suppress these feelings because I wanted everyone else around me to be comfortable. Because a conversation like that can be very detrimental to anyone, whether it's the victim or the people that have to, be in that conversation. And the way that conversation was handled really was detrimental, but it wasn't to anybody else, it was to me. I thought that that was okay. The dude had no consequence. He never got in trouble for it. And it was like that was the tone that they set for a situation like that. And it was sad that I didn't realize it until now, but now I know like how to better handle situations like that and how they should be handled, so I can call it out if I see it happening. But has anyone else had an experience?
I know I had an experience around 2-3 years ago around this time. I went to a summer camp, and there was 100 girls in total, but there's only 2 African American girls when the rest were white. And I was one of those 2 African American girls. So I already got stares from all the coaches or the people in charge looking at me like, oh, what are you doing here? Why you don't belong here and stuff like that. And it was really with everyone looking at me just because I know it was about my skin color, was really hurtful. And around the second day, I had a whole bunch of girls come up to me and were like, just touching my hair because I had it straightened. They were just touching my hair like, oh, it's so soft. I thought it was going to be a rough texture. I thought it was going to be nappy and stuff like that. And then they called their other friends over just to rub their hands through my head, and I was not okay with it. And around the next day, the other African American girl ended up accidentally pushing the other girl down or knocking the other girl over. And they started pushing her around, calling her the N-word and making fun of her and just calling her out her name and stuff like that. And I myself was too scared to stand up for her because I felt like I was going to be judged or stereotyped if I was to stand up for her, since she was the only African American girl and I was one of the only African American girls. It wouldn't make, everyone was already looking like we didn't belong there, so it would have been very difficult if I stood up for her.
Right.
Does anybody else have an experience?
I know I do, especially through like elementary and middle school. I've had this experience of being the token smart black girl. And we can talk about the whole token thing on another day, because that's a whole nother thing that needs to be addressed. But being a token anything is seriously detrimental to your identity, because like token means like the thing that you're known for is the only thing that's important about you, or the only thing that people address about you. And like, I'm proud to be a girl, black, and smart, but those aren't the only parts of my identity that should be recognized, especially in a classroom setting where teachers would put me on a pedestal for being smart and almost like subconsciously like make me the example black student. And I feel like black students should never have to be held to the exact same to the same standard, because we're all black and we're all different, and that's what makes it special. It's like, besides like race in general, every student is different just because of how they are. And I feel like that was detrimental to me, because I know I have my self-worth and I know like who I am. But I feel like if I was in a moment where I felt like I didn't have anything worth mentioning or anything worth being acknowledged for, and I feel like at the time it was almost, I would start thinking like, if I wasn't smart, like would I still be treated the same way I was, or would I still be put on this pedestal? And that was just detrimental to me, because I felt like they were using me as an example when I didn't want to be one. But I always feel like that was detrimental to other black students, because like it's just difficult to talk about, because
Right.
black students should never have to be, especially not even like all black students should never have to look and be like, oh, she's light skinned, they like her more, or, oh, she's smart, they like her more, like, because we're all black and we shouldn't have to be like pick and choose about what we want to be and what we want to be acknowledged for. And I also feel like that contributes to that slave mentality and that generational trauma, where back in slavery, white slave masters used to like try to like pit the light skinned, the dark skinned slaves against each other. And I just feel like that shouldn't be something that's perpetuated or even included in modern classrooms or in society in general.
Right.
So
And I feel like that's definitely a tactic. Like it is used, and not only do we have people fighting against us, but when they're able to put us against us, you can see how that can be detrimental to the progression of our community. And with that being said, do you feel like because they put you on this pedestal and try to basically tell everyone, be like her, do you think that caused any animosity or envy between you and your classmates?
well, to be honest, in the moment, I knew that it bothered me being put on a pedestal, but until now or recently, I never really thought about how other people reacted to me. Because at the end of the day, I think it was common knowledge, like, oh, she doesn't like when they say that, but she won't say anything about it. But I honestly feel like some students, yeah, they did have some sort of animosity towards me, because like with colorism in our society, light skins are viewed as like just in a really racist sense, like almost like light skins are like better, which is so no, but like but I honestly feel like it feeds into the idea of colorism where like the light skin, like the more associated you are with white, like the better you are. And I honestly feel like not only did that make me uncomfortable, but I felt like it perpetuated with other students being like, oh, she's light skinned. Like how I said, like, of course, oh, she's light skinned. Of course they like her more. Oh, she's light skinned. Of course she's smart. And I feel like in some scenarios, it did cause some sort of animosity. But I also feel like in general, people just like, they understood that I didn't like it, and they understood like, oh, he's just saying that because that's what he thinks objectively, like the teacher. So with that being said, I guess I'll just ask you, Janelle. With that being said, I'll ask, why do you think it is so important to address the inequalities in society and the education system today?
Well, I feel like honestly, within the education system, everybody, and within just the whole world and in this country in general, everybody likes to say that they do fight for equality and they are advocates for equality. But without equity, there can be no equality. And that's the thing a lot of people fail to realize. There is no equity, and you're not doing anything to make things equitable. So there never will be equality, as much as you like to say that that's what you stand for and that's what you're fighting for. And it's like when students feel like they aren't prioritized or treated equally within schools, they start to lose hope or, a sense of direction. For an example, I have an older brother, and my older brother had ADHD. And with that being my older brother, I was that younger sibling that always looked up to my siblings as a role model or to see what they were doing. And the only thing is like, for some reason, whenever they would talk about my brother, his name would always be said like in a bad light. He was never he was never appreciated for the good things that he were doing. And it was like, with him in school, we all already know that having a disorder such as ADHD is a setback, which is another reason why we need equity so much. In his school, they definitely lack that equity. And instead of taking his disorder for what it was, they wrote it off as more of a behavioral issue. Oh, he's a disruption in class because, oh, he feels like he needs to stand up or he needs to get out of the classroom, or, just the things that he did were never they never took the time to understand why he was doing those things, or try and give him that support. They wrote it off as a behavioral issue. So of course he had all these things on his record, and he was getting suspended and this and that. And the more people told him, oh, school isn't for you, you're not really bright, da 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 da, da. You should look elsewhere, find other things that you're good at. And all the world had to tell him was that he's gonna end up in the streets, or that he's gonna be a thug or a criminal. When he lost himself and was trying to find himself and had no help, those are the only things that he heard. And currently he is in a very bad predicament. I feel like it has a lot to do with the fact that he never really had that support that he needed within schools, or just that support in general from the world and from society. And it's like we see this all the time with minority students. That's pretty much what the school to prison pipeline is, and that's what it does. And people need to pay a lot of attention to it. And you know, the fight for equality will never be won unless we have equity. So people really need to be making schools and school environments equitable. But how do you think the idea that minorities don't have equity plays into the choice of siding with either the oppressed or the oppressor? Because you can't side with both.
So when you look at the foundation of this country, it was illegal for slaves to learn how to read and write, and anyone who was found trying to teach the slaves how to read and write was basically punished. So you cannot claim you are helping us if you do not have our best interests at heart. Stop being a bystander to injustice and thinking just because you weren't the one directly committing the wrong, that you are still not in the wrong. And you see that with the George Floyd situation, where George Floyd was a white police officer jabbing his knee into the neck of a black man with two people on his back and one standing in front of him. And which for a little under 9 minutes, which ended up to the Black man, George Floyd, getting killed. And the 3 police officers didn't think they were in the wrong because they weren't the one directly with the knee on the man's neck. But however, with them just sitting there or standing there and not saying anything makes them in the wrong, which causes them to be the oppressor. So you can't claim you want liberty and justice for all or claim that you're fighting for the movement of equality. There is no in between. You're either the oppressed or you're either the oppressor. And with that being said, definitely do not be the person who feels entitled to do something that is wrong. You should always do what is right. This right here is what the foundation of this country was built off of. We have to educate ourselves in order to understand how to get rid of that slave mentality that is still being carried on in today's society. Like when you look at President Donald Trump saying that he was making Juneteenth popular. If we aren't educated about our own history, people like Trump see that as an opportunity to swoop in and take advantage of it. And continuing to perpetuate that slave mentality that things we already own is going to be giving back to us as privileges, you know?
Well, I guess to end off this great conversation, I'd just like to say that Black people celebrating the 4th of July is an example of how lack of knowledge leads to normalizations that could be detrimental to all people everywhere. We need to educate ourselves about how to break these mental shackles that confine us to these low standards and expectations for ourselves, so that when people like Donald Trump try to take credit for our achievements, they get nothing. We must understand that education truly is liberation. We will no longer allow people to take away our rights and give them back as privileges. People must understand that there is no history without Black history. And our history is not supplemental, because without us, you wouldn't be anywhere near where you are today. Give credit where credit is due.
On today's episode, we discussed the origin of the 4th of July, what this meant for the slaves, and how it's still affecting us today. Thank you for tuning into today's episode of No Justice, No Peace, the MLK's The Take, and joining us in this conversation surrounding why your independence is not ours, and Frederick Douglass's What to the Slave is the 4th of July. As we close this episode, we would like to honor Frederick Douglass and watch this short film of his 5 descendants read his famous speech, What to the Slave is the 4th of July.
Do I look there or look there? Okay. Okay. My name is Alexa Ann Watson, and I am the great-great-great-granddaughter of Frederick
Douglass is my great-great-great-great.
I am the great-great-great-granddaughter of Frederick Douglass.
I am the great-great-great-great-grandchild.
I've been counting on my fingers since I was like 5.
Whenever you're ready, here we go.
This is the 4th of July. It is the birthday of your national independence and of your political freedom.
Fellow citizens, I shall not presume to dwell at length on the associations that cluster about this day. The simple story of it is that 76 years ago, the people of this country were British subjects.
Oppression makes a wise man mad. Your fathers were wise men, and if they did not go mad, they became restive under this treatment.
With brave men, there's always a remedy for oppression.
They succeeded, and today you reap the fruits of their success. The freedom gained is yours, and you, therefore, may properly celebrate this anniversary.
Fellow citizens, pardon me. Allow me to ask, why am I called upon to speak here today? What have I, or those I represent, to do with your national independence?
Are the great principles of political freedom and of natural justice embodied in that Declaration of Independence extended to us?
I am not included within the pale of this glorious anniversary.
Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us. The blessings in which you this day rejoice are not enjoyed in common.
The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence bequeathed by your fathers is shared by you, not by me.
The sunlight that brought life and healing to you has brought stripes and death to me.
This 4th of July is yours, not mine.
You may rejoice, I must mourn.
Fellow citizens, Above your national tumultuous joy, I hear the mournful wail of millions.
At a time like this, scorching irony, not convincing argument is needed.
Oh, had I the ability and could reach the nation's ear, I would today pour out a fiery stream of biting ridicule, blasting reproach, withering sarcasm, and stern rebuke.
For it is not light that is needed, but fire.
It is not the gentle shower, but thunder.
We need the storm, the whirlwind, and the earthquake.
The feeling of the nation must be quickened.
The conscience of the nation must be roused.
The propriety of the nation must be startled.
The hypocrisy of the nation must be exposed.
And its crimes against God and man must be proclaimed and denounced.
What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him, more than all other days in the year, the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim.
To him, your celebration is a sham.
Your boasted liberty an unholy license.
Your national greatness, swelling vanity.
Your sounds of rejoicing are empty and heartless.
Your denunciations of tyrants, brass-fronted impudence.
Your shouts of liberty and equality, hollow mockery.
Your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgivings,
with all your religious parade and solemnity, are to him
mere bombast,
fraud,
deception,
impiety,
and hypocrisy. There is not a nation on the earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than are the people of these United States at this very hour. Allow me to say in conclusion, notwithstanding the dark picture I have this day presented of the state of the nation, I do not despair of this country.
We hope you took something from our take. If you didn't, here's your chance to. In What to the Slave Was the 4th of July, Frederick Douglass used this analogy of a snake. When the nation was first born, the snake began to coil. Frederick expressed his optimism within this because he knew that there would be a point in time where the snake could not coil any tighter. He knew that when the snake reached that point, it would attack, and that time is now. But we need to understand that our liberation cannot be used to put them in the same position that they put us in, because that would turn us into the oppressor, in which that's not our goal. And while you may think that's what you want to do, it's not, because they've already done that to themselves. Now that we have our liberation, we can progress. They fear our progression because they can't stop it. They realize that there may be a point to where we progress and surpass them, but we will only use our liberation to aid in our progression. So here's how we can begin this liberation. Here's our call to action. We ask you to educate someone today about the origin of the 4th of July, because education is liberation. The purpose of this is to help you understand that your mindset can and will make a big impact.
If you enjoyed today's take, make sure to tune to our next episode on July 16th at 4 p.m. where we'll discuss the changes we've made within our Black History curriculum here in DPS, featuring Tamara Acevedo, the Deputy Superintendent of Academics of Denver Public Schools.
You can follow us on our Facebook page.
No justice, no peace.
no peace.
DMLK,
The Take. And email us at dmlksthetake@gmail.com. Make sure you give us your feedback through our social medias on what you think our last 3 episodes should be about. Contact us for a chance to be on the show and give us your take. Bye.